Dude, imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing the money you've trusted your whole life, your savings, your pension, the cash in your wallet doesn't mean what you thought it did. Like, suddenly it's monopoly money. That's not sci-fi, man. That's a real possibility, and most people have no idea how close we are to that. So here's the deal. Today we're going to break this down. What's happening, why it matters, and most importantly, what the hell you can actually do about it. I've spent a lot of time talking to people who study systems, how they work, how they break, and what's happening right now. We're living through something totally unprecedented in human history, completely uncharted territory, and yet people are just cruising around like it's another Tuesday, grabbing Starbucks, checking Instagram. Think about it this way. 100 years ago, if the stock market tanked in London, people in Kansas City barely noticed. You were basically living in a local bubble. Your bank was local. Your job tied to your town. Global events felt global, like they were happening somewhere else. Today, totally different. We built this giant interconnected global economy like a massive electrical grid where everything depends on everything else. When it works, it's amazing. Efficient, powerful, slick. But when it doesn't, that's when things get really gnarly. Now, if America sneezes, the whole world's got pneumonia. We saw flashes of that in 2008 or when markets wobbled recently. But honestly, we haven't seen the full monster yet. And here's the real curveball. Social media, fear, rumors, panic. It all spreads at the speed of light now. A whisper on Twitter can turn into a bank run in hours. Hours, man. Not weeks, not months, hours. You might be thinking, okay, Joe, we've been through some bad crashes before. .com bust, 2008, oil crisis in the 70s, and yeah, we did survive those. But here's the part that keeps me up at night this time, is different, not because humans changed, we're still greedy, still scared, but because the scale and the speed of the system changed. Whenever I talk to engineers, rocket scientists, whoever, the question's always the same. What happens when a system gets stress it was never designed to handle? And dude, our financial system was not designed for this. It wasn't designed for TikTok level panic spreading across the globe in real time. So what's at stake here? Let's talk about the D word, depression. Not just a big recession, an actual global depression. People mix those up all the time. A recession, that's like the power going out for a while. It sucks, it's scary, but the grid's still there. The lights eventually come back on. A depression, though, that's when the power plant itself starts breaking down. That's when the whole system isn't just flickering, it's failing. And instead of markets bouncing back, they just stay down. For years, it's not just, oh, some people lose their jobs for a few months. Nah, man, in a depression, whole industries vanish. It's not just stock portfolios dipping. It's the entire idea of what actually holds value starting to crack. Ask anybody who lived through the Great Depression or who had parents and grandparents telling them about it. It wasn't just numbers going down on a chart. It was real families losing everything. Whole communities flipped upside down for years. Not months, years. And here's the kicker. Back in the 30s, countries still had some economic independence. If one ship went down, maybe you could swim to another one. Today, we're all in the same damn boat. If this thing starts taking on water, there's nowhere to swim. And dude, think about being in your 60s or 70s right now. You did everything right. You saved, worked hard, followed the rules. You've earned that financial peace of mind. But suddenly the rules of the game change. Not because you screwed up, but because the system itself got rigged differently. That's brutal. Now, here's the part that might surprise you. This danger isn't about some mysterious force, some shadowy villain pulling strings. It's way simpler. It's the money itself. Every dollar in your pocket, every number in your bank account, it's basically just a promise. But what happens when the people making those promises stop following the rules of promising? For most of history, money was backed by something real. Gold, silver, stuff with actual value. Like having a car with a full tank of gas, you knew what you had. But since the 70s, we've been running on promises about promises, just printing IOUs on top of IOUs. And the folks in charge figured out they can print as many as they want. Here's the analogy. When you build a rocket, every component has to be tested, verified, real. You can't fake the physics of getting to orbit. You can't just say, well, imagine some more thrust. The universe doesn't care. Reality checks you hard. Our money system, though, it's like trying to launch a rocket on fumes. Maybe you clear the tower. Maybe you even climb a little. But eventually physics kicks in, and that crash is not going to be soft. And here's what blows my mind. We've printed trillions, not millions, not billions, trillions. To put that in perspective, if you counted one number per second up to 1 trillion, it would take you over 30 years. That's how much new money just popped out of thin air. At the same time, we kept interest rates near zero, which is basically like turning gravity off in the economy. Stuff that should have crashed just keeps floating around. You can't tell what's real anymore. And then you've got the repo market. Most people have never even heard of it, but it's like the plumbing system of the financial world, banks lending to each other overnight, so the whole thing keeps flowing. When that system makes weird noises, dude, that's like hearing a clunk in your car's engine. You don't know exactly what's broken, but you know it's not good. And the fixes, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars just to keep the pipes from bursting. That's not strength. That's a system barely holding itself together with duct tape and really expensive Band-Aids. And this isn't just theory, man. This is happening right now. Man, we've literally seen this before. Back in 2008, there was this finance guy who straight up predicted Lehman Brothers was going to collapse. He went on TV months before, basically waving his arms, saying, hey, this giant investment bank is heading for disaster, and nobody cared. Wall Street laughed at him. Experts dismissed him. Stock price looked fine. But he was looking deeper at the fundamentals, not the surface. And when Lehman finally went down, it set off a chain reaction that wrecked the whole global economy. And it wasn't just numbers in some banker's spreadsheet. It was real people. Folks lost their homes, their jobs, their retirement savings, entire communities gutted. But here's the crazy part. There were people who saw it coming. And not only did they protect themselves, some of them made fortune. And that's not about being a vulture. It's about understanding how the system works. In every crisis, wealth doesn't vanish, it moves. From the unprepared to the prepared. From people wishing and hoping to people planning for reality. That's the big lesson from 2008. When systems break down, the people who get wrecked are the ones waiting for someone else to fix it. The people who do okay are the ones who take responsibility, get educated, and make hard choices before they're forced to. Which brings us to something huge, and this is personal. For every senior in America, pensions and retirement funds getting looted, and I don't mean in a tinfoil hat conspiracy way. I mean documented, provable reality. Firefighters, teachers, cops, private sector workers, people who did their time, paid into the system, played by the rules. And a lot of them are finding out the promises don't hold up. Here's how it went down. In the 70s, we shifted from old school pensions where your employer guaranteed you a check for life to 401 style contribution plans. On paper, it sounded empowering. More control, more options. But what it really did was shove all the risk onto workers who were never trained to manage investments. It's like asking the passengers to fly the plane. You wouldn't do that, but that's what we did with retirement. And the pensions that were supposed to be safe, Wall Street found ways to bleed them dry. Fees, commissions, sketchy investments, legalized theft in a suit. Here's a brutal example. The average firefighter retiring today was promised benefits worth over $1 million. But when they go to cash out, the money's not there. It's been siphoned off, layer by layer, and it doesn't stop with them. When pension funds can't pay out, taxpayers eat the cost. When 401ks tank in a market crash, retirees lose their safety net. The very people who need that money for health care, housing, and basic dignity, they're the ones left holding the bag. Now zoom out. By 2030, around 2 billion baby boomers worldwide will hit retirement. 2 billion people all trying to turn their paper promises into actual goods and services at the same time. The math doesn't work. Japan struggling with it, Germany struggling, every developed country that overpromised is hitting the wall. That demographic bulge, it's all hitting retirement age together. So if those promises can't be kept, what do? you start thinking differently about wealth. You stop relying only on paper IOUs and start looking at real assets, stuff that actually holds value no matter what politicians or corporations say. Here's a story. In 1972, some guy buys a single gold coin for $50. Just a little side investment, nothing major. Today, that coin's worth about $2,000. That's not some flashy get-rich-quick scam. That's 50 years of protection against the system quietly draining your money's value. Meanwhile, that 50 bill from 72, it buys a fraction of what it did back then. That's why people still talk about precious metals. Think of dollars like batteries, they drain over time. Gold and silver are like solar panels. They keep generating value, no matter what happens to the grid. Man, silver is one of those things nobody talks about, but it's fascinating right now. Like, it's sitting at these levels that honestly seem kind of absurd when you look at the fundamentals. Think about it. Silver isn't just some shiny coin collectors keep in a drawer. It's used in electronics, solar panels, medicine, all kinds of industrial stuff. It's scarce, it's useful, and historically it's always had this tight relationship with gold. And yet today, you can get a silver coin for, what, $20? That's like the price of a pizza and a couple of beers. Here's the kicker. A lot of people who follow this stuff think silver should be way higher. Not hype, not conspiracy, just basic supply and demand. The cool thing about silver, though, is that it's accessible. Anybody can buy one coin. You don't have to be some hedge fund guy. You don't need to know a banker. You don't even need to understand the stock market. You just need to understand the difference between something real and something that's basically just a promise on paper. And then this is the part most people miss. You actually have to act on that understanding. But here's what blows my mind. Less than 0.1% of Americans own any precious metals. That's wild. We're living through the biggest monetary experiment in human history. Governments printing trillions, currencies being stretched in ways we've never seen before, and almost nobody is taking even the most basic step to protect themselves. Not because they can't, not because they don't have access to information. Dude, we've got more financial education at our fingertips than any generation ever. The real reason? It's psychological. And this is something I've seen over and over. Most people simply cannot change, even when they know they should, even when the evidence is right there, even when the cost of not changing is staring them in the face. That's human nature. I learned this lesson the hard way, talking to entrepreneurs and running companies. You can have the best engineers, the clearest data, undeniable proof that a new approach is needed, and people will still dig in their heels. They'll resist, not because they're dumb, but because humans cling to what's familiar, even when the familiar is driving them off a cliff. The truth is, the most powerful skill anyone can develop isn't coding or finance or even discipline. It's the ability to change internally, to change how you think, how you see risk, how you respond to opportunities. Most people never really develop that, and that's why they get stuck in the same loops for decades. Same job frustrations, same money problems, same patterns. Think about babies learning to walk. It's the perfect metaphor. They fall down constantly. Every attempt is failure, over and over. But do they quit? Do they say, walking's too risky, I'll just crawl forever? No. They keep trying because they don't have that fear of failure drilled into them yet. They understand instinctively that failure is part of learning. But somewhere along the line, school beats that out of us. We get trained to fear mistakes. We get told to stick to what's safe, what's approved, what everyone else is doing. We punish ourselves for being wrong instead of rewarding ourselves for trying. And then we carry that mindset into adulthood, into how we handle money, how we invest, how we deal with uncertainty. That's why so many people freeze up when it comes to stuff like preparing for economic change. The people who do well with money aren't necessarily geniuses. They're the ones willing to be wrong sometimes, to take a shot, learn, adjust, and keep going. But the majority of people have been conditioned to do the exact opposite. I was talking to a doctor recently, successful guy, makes good money, and he told me he's been hearing warnings about financial instability for decades. And he admitted, yeah, I never acted on any of it. You've been saying this stuff for years and I just ignored it. That right there is the mindset trap. It's not that he didn't understand the information. It's that acting on it required stepping outside his comfort zone. And that's the bigger picture here. Owning something like silver isn't about chasing profit. It's about breaking out of that loop. It's about saying, okay, the system isn't built to protect me, so I'm going to take responsibility for protecting myself. That shift from passive to active, from waiting for someone else to fix it to taking control, that's the real power. Most people won't do it. They'll keep trusting the system, keep hoping the promises will hold, and maybe for a while they'll be fine. But when stress hits the system, and it always does, wealth shifts, it moves. And it moves toward the people who took the uncomfortable steps in advance. That's why silver fascinates me. Not just because of the price or the supply-demand stuff, but because it's a kind of litmus test. Anybody can afford one coin. Anybody can take that first step. And yet, almost nobody does. Not because it's too expensive, not because the knowledge isn't there, but because real change is the hardest thing for humans to pull off. And if you can crack that, if you can train yourself to adapt, to think differently, to move when the herd stands still, that's when you stop being the guy who gets blindsided and start being the guy who's ready. So here's the thing, the doctor I mentioned earlier. Now he's watching his retirement account swing all over the place. 1 week it's up, the next it's down. Meanwhile, inflation is chewing through his purchasing power like termites in the floorboards. And suddenly he's asking, okay, Joe, what do I do now? And man, it's heartbreaking, because the truth is the time to prepare for a storm isn't when you're already standing outside getting soaked. It's before the clouds even roll in. Once you're drenched, your options shrink. They get way more limited, way more expensive. But here's the interesting part, and the reason I'm not just doom and gloom about this whole thing. People don't actually change because of information. You can hit them with charts, data, expert opinions, doesn't matter. They change when the consequences smack them in the face. They change when the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of trying something new. That's just human nature. And yeah, that means a lot of folks won't move until they're already in trouble. But it also means that when the pain hits, the window for opportunity cracks wide open. And here's why I'm optimistic. Every major crisis creates massive opportunities. Not just for billionaires, not just for insiders, but for anybody who understands what's happening and positions themselves the right way. The trick is to think like an entrepreneur, even if you've never started a business in your life. Entrepreneurs don't just look at a problem and panic. They look at broken systems and think, okay, what can I build here? What can I buy here? What's the opportunity hiding inside the chaos? That's what I see when I look at downturns. I don't just see pain. I see assets going on sale. I see businesses that were impossible to touch suddenly becoming affordable. I see regular people suddenly motivated to learn things they should have been learning years ago. Look back at 2008. While most folks were paralyzed, just hoping things would magically go back to normal, the smart investors were loading up. Interest rates were at historic lows. Real estate was dirt cheap. Businesses were basically on clearance racks. And the people who moved then, a lot of them built fortunes that still stand today. They understood something fundamental. Crashes don't erase wealth. They redistribute it. Think of it like a giant clearance sale. For everything important, prices get reset. Stuff that was outrageously overpriced suddenly makes sense. Properties that were out of reach become accessible. Companies that were too expensive to start from scratch become easy to buy outright. But here's the catch. You've got to be ready to act when everyone else is frozen in fear. And that doesn't mean you need to be rich already. Some of the biggest fortunes in American history came from people who started with almost nothing. The difference was they had the knowledge, the preparation, and the guts to move when everyone else was stuck. Now, if you're a senior listening to this, you might be thinking, come on, Joe. I'm not about to start flipping real estate or launching a company at my age. And I get that. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you don't need to take massive, risky leaps. You need to think in terms of small actions that create protection. Remember that silver coin we talked about? That's not a get-rich play. That's not you trying to become Warren Buffett overnight. That's just one small step that says, okay, part of my foundation isn't tied to a government promise or a Wall Street pension scheme. And if you take that step and then another, before long you've built something solid, something independent, something nobody can quietly siphon away while you're not looking. And that mindset shift from waiting for the system to save you to actually taking small steps to save yourself, that's the most powerful thing you can do. All right, let's talk real estate. And I don't mean you suddenly have to become some giant property mogul with a yacht and a cigar. That's not the point. The point is, if you understand just the basics of how debt works, how taxes work in real estate, and how you can use other people's money, banks, lenders, even tenants to pick up assets that generate income and grow in value, it can be insanely powerful. Even if you only do it in small ways. That's the beauty of real assets, man. During inflationary times, when the cost of everything's going up, paper assets, stocks, bonds, these promises that live in spreadsheets, they can lose value. But stuff tied to necessities, housing, energy, food production, that stuff goes up. Because no matter what the currency does, people still need a roof over their head, they still need power, they still need to eat. And here's the kicker. You don't need perfect timing. You don't have to catch the exact bottom or nail the exact top. You just need to be positioned before the big shifts happen. Because once the avalanche is rolling, it's too late to step out of the way. That brings us to the bigger picture, the thing nobody really wants to admit out loud. We're living in what I call the everything bubble. Everything is inflated. Real estate prices have floated up so high, they're completely detached from people's incomes. The stock market, trading at levels that only make sense if you assume growth never stops and the money faucet never shuts off. Bond markets, pricing in assumptions about interest rates and government stability that might not hold up at all. It's like we've built this massive house of cards. Each card is a market, a promise, an assumption, and we keep stacking them higher. But everybody knows deep down what happens when one of those cards slips. It doesn't just fall gently, it cascades. One falls, knocks the next, triggers the next, until something that looked rock solid yesterday is rubble tomorrow. Now, this is the part where most people panic. But you know what I find fascinating? These are the moments when the big breakthroughs happen. When old systems break down, space opens up for new ones. When the big institutions stumble, entrepreneurs rush in with new ideas. When old ways of thinking fail, new ways of thinking get born. And that's not some abstract philosophy, it's real. Some of the most valuable companies on earth were born during recessions or depressions. Some of the biggest fortunes in history came from people who looked around while everyone else was screaming the world is ending and said, nope, this is the beginning of something new. And here's where I think seniors especially have an edge. If you've lived through a few economic cycles, you know that nothing's permanent. You've seen change that felt impossible happen in the blink of an eye. You know that the world resets itself over and over. That perspective, that's gold. So the question isn't, is change coming? Change is always coming. The real question is, are you going to get swept up in it like driftwood? Or are you going to adapt and surf the wave? Because when systems are fragile, the people who survive aren't the ones waiting for rescue. They're the ones who build their own lifeboat. And you don't do that because you're selfish or trying to hoard. You do it because the best thing you can do for your family, your community, even your country is not become dead weight when things get tough. And that means one thing: you've got to take responsibility for your own financial education, especially if you've never done it before. You can't just lean back on old promises, pensions, Social Security, whatever, and assume someone else has it handled. That's hope, and hope isn't a plan. Instead, you make decisions based on facts and fundamentals. You accept that the rules you grew up with, work hard, save cash, trust the bank, those rules might not serve you in the world that's emerging. That's scary, yeah, but it's also empowering, because once you see it, you realize there's opportunity where everyone else only sees threat. And that's the secret, man. Every crisis creates winners as well as losers, and the difference between them isn't luck, it's preparation, education, willingness to act when it's time to act. So if you're a senior listening to this, I want you to hear this clearly. This isn't about fear. This isn't about doom and gloom. This is about empowerment. This is about finally taking the wheel of your own financial life. And honestly, you've got advantages younger people don't. You've seen cycles. You've got perspective. You've maybe got some resources, even if they feel modest, that can be positioned intelligently. And most of all, you know the difference between what really matters and what's just noise. Younger people get distracted by hype. You've lived long enough to spot the difference. That's why something as simple as buying a silver coin or a gold coin, or putting money into a small real estate deal, or starting a side business, it's not just about the dollars. It's a vote of confidence in yourself. It's saying, I trust my judgment more than I trust a politician's promise. So what do you actually do? You start small. You don't have to overhaul your entire life in one swoop. You buy that one silver coin, not to get rich, but to prove to yourself that you can take action. You pick up a book about money that challenges your assumptions. You sit down with somebody who knows real estate or precious metals or running a small business, and you just talk. The goal isn't to become Warren Buffett overnight. The goal is to shift your mindset from waiting for rescue to building your own lifeboat. From hoping someone else will manage your future to taking steps to manage it yourself. Because here's what I believe, and I believe it with absolute conviction. The people who understand what's happening and prepare accordingly aren't just going to survive, they're going to thrive. They're going to look back on this period when everyone else thought it was the end of the world and say, that was the moment I finally took control. The future belongs to people who can adapt, who can learn, who can see opportunity hiding inside chaos. And if you've lived long enough, you already know that's possible. You've seen it before. Every ending is also a beginning. So the question isn't, can you do this? The question is, will you? And the time to decide is now. While preparing is still a choice instead of a desperate scramble. While you can still move with intention instead of panic, most people have no idea what's coming. But you do.